Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So we're about a month away from free agency, so I thought it'd be a fun idea to go through some of the top unrestricted free agents and predict whether or not I think they're staying or they're leaving or they're hitting the open market on July 1st. It's going to be based on a bunch of factors, based on did they have a career year? Did they price themselves out of their respective team's salary cap situation? So without further ado, we got a lot of names to go through, so let's just start going through it. Up first, Jonathan Marchessault. Marchessault had a career year, 42 goals, 27 assists, 69 points, as well as being very good yet again in the playoffs after winning the Conn Smythe last year. I think I'm going to go with leave. As of right now, at least, they don't even have the money to re-sign him. They have like $5.9 million in cap space once they eventually move Robin Lehner over a $5 million cap hit over to LTIR next season. So they don't have any money. They don't have any money. And we look at Jonathan Marchessault, maybe he would sign a 5-year deal at $6 million, 6-year deal at $6 million, just because Vegas says, screw it. Let's throw a bunch of term at Jonathan Marchessault. But when just looking at it post-Hanifin extension, that was maybe them kind of saying, like, we're going to go with the younger player where we can't really pay you. Marchessault is 33, 34. I hope Marchessault stays in Vegas, but I would understand if they mutually part ways. They just say, we don't have the money, and Marchessault goes somewhere, signs a 4-year, $7.5 million deal to an up-and-coming team. When looking at it, although Marchessault has been there since day one, when it's not like he's been a Vegas Golden Knight his entire life, I think as of right now, if things change, if they end up moving money, I think if they have enough money for Marchessault, they're going to make something work. But right now, the money just isn't there, so I'm going to say leave. Next up, Sam Reinhart, another guy that had a career year, absolutely smashed the 50-goal mark, has been very good for them in the playoffs. I think that this is a stay. I think when you look at it, back-to-back seasons of the Florida Panthers going on these deep playoff runs, I can't see them risking letting Sam Reinhart walk. Although I think they would still be a playoff team without Sam Reinhart, he is a massive part to this team. He's their third best forward, fantastic two-way guy. I think Florida's just going to try their best to run it back, and they right now do have the salary cap to definitely re-sign Reinhart. We'll talk about another guy that they maybe could let walk that probably is more realistic to let walk, but I think that the two parties have been talking together basically throughout the season. The number isn't going to change that drastically at this point, so I really can't see Sam Reinhart. He's been such a fantastic add to them ever since they got him back in 2021. I think they're going to find something, make something work, like an 8-year deal. It's going to be an 8-year deal, even though he is 29 years old. He's getting up there in age. Considering Florida can offer that 8th year, I think that is massive in this situation. I could see 8 years, $8.59 million. You might think that's low, but again, he's like 28, 29. It's not like he's signing this at 25, 26, where you're going to get him for his entire prime. You're probably going to get 3 more years of elite Reinhart. Then he's going to start to regress. You have to pay a little bit of a premium on the back end for a guy like Sam Reinhart. Next up, we got Brett Pesce, and I think Brett Pesce is going to be hitting the open market. I think he's definitely going to leave. There's been constant reports that neither side have budged, and rightfully so. Brett Pesce was not that good for the Carolina Hurricanes this season. Had like 13 points in 70 games. He's a far better player than that. Don't get me wrong. He has prior seasons of like 35, 40 points, but rightfully so. The Carolina Hurricanes have far too many priorities that we're obviously going to get to in this video to be shelling out $4.5 million, maybe even 5.5 for a Brett Pesce. I think he's going to hit the open market, and someone is going to give him a decent contract. Again, I think he is far better than the player that he displayed this season, but for Carolina, just the fit doesn't make sense in terms of also having guys like Alexander Nikita coming up, not this season, but next season. Scott Morrow can play some NHL minutes. The Carolina Hurricanes do not need to prioritize a guy that just had his worst season, arguably, of his entire NHL career, especially at the cap hit that he's looking at. Brett Pesce is, if there was most confident in terms of guys hitting the open market, I think Brett Pesce might be my number one out of any guy I'm going to list. Actually, there's another guy down the line that we might talk about that I think is good as gone, but Brett Pesce is basically a lock to hit the open market. Another Carolina Hurricane, Jake Guentzel. I am going to go with stay. Reports have come out that they're making it apparent that they're going to prioritize re-signing Guentzel over re-signing a restricted free agent in Martin Necas, and it makes sense. Guentzel is the far better player right now, and when you consider the fact that they could trade Necas for a decent haul versus, I guess you could trade Jake Guentzel's unrestricted free agency rights, but you're not going to get nearly as much than, say, Martin Necas, where it's team controlled. So I think Guentzel makes a lot of sense. Was a very good player for the Carolina Hurricanes, both in the regular season, in the playoffs. Similarly to a Reinhart, he is a little bit up there in age, 29, 30 years old, but I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to lock him up on that 8-year deal at around, again, similarly to a Sam Reinhart, 8.59, which might be a low AAV right now. Once it gets up there in age, it might be bad, but I can't see Jake Guentzel leaving. I think considering they went aggressive at the deadline, Carolina isn't really known for their rentals at the deadline. They like to trade trade for guys and then end up re-signing them. So I think Jake Guentzel is going to be a Carolina Hurricane for the foreseeable future. He is unfortunately going to terrorize my New York Islanders in the Metro Division for a long time. Next up, Brandon Montour. I am going to go with stay. I think I am going to go with stay. I think Florida is really just going to run it back with this core, with Sam Reinhart, with Brandon Montour. And Montour is playing very, very good in these playoffs. If Montour had another season where he was a fantastic 70-point guy, I think maybe he would hit the open market, but he did have a bit of a step back, at least offensively, during the regular season. I think for a guy like Brandon Montour, I think going back to, again, Jake Guentzel, Sam Reinhart, the fact that Florida can offer him an 8-year deal is going to be massive in this. I think an 8-year deal at 6.5, 6.75. They're going to point to the Forsling contract to 5.75. Brandon Montour is more established, so he's going to get more money, but Forsling is younger and has arguably been better this season than Brandon Montour. So I think around 6.5 makes a lot of sense for both parties in terms of Montour getting that guaranteed bag long term, and the Florida Panthers getting Montour at kind of a discount for the next 3 to 4 years. I think that's roughly where they're going to end up. 6.5, 7.5, maybe 7, similarly to the Noah Hannafin extension, but I think that sounds about right for Brandon Montour. Next up, Steven Stamkos. I'm going to go with stay. Even though they don't have the money right now, I think they are going to make something happen. Considering, unlike Vegas, they have a bunch of things that they need to plug. So even if Marchessault wanted that $6 million, they still have a couple of roster spots that they got to replace. So it's not just that. The Lightning, for the most part, they have like 2 open roster spots. I believe they have 2 forward slots left over and around $5 to $6 million in cap space. I think they're going to make something work, whether that's trading a Tanner Jeannot or someone else. Who else? I'm blanking on the name, but someone else has Connor Sheary as a $2 million cap hit. I could see them moving out one of those guys, getting to $6 million, then offering Steven Stamkos kind of a goofy, like 6-year, $6 million contract. It's going to be bad, but I think Julien Brisebois realizes that they have maybe 2 to 3 years left. And even they're probably not contenders right now. So I think he's kind of just going to say, like, we're going to offer Stamkos a long term, similarly to a Tom Wilson, even though Steven Stamkos is a far better player. Similarly to Tom Wilson, we're going to give him a decent contract so we get him a low cap hit for the next couple of years. And then he's going to mentor us kind of as we go through maybe this retool rebuild when we ship out a Braden Point, a Kucherov in 3 to 4 years, once we're really not in the playoff mix anymore. So I think Steven Stamkos is going to be a Tampa Bay Lightning for life. I can't see that. He's been there for so long. He's been there for a decade and a half. I don't think that he's going to end up leaving. Sean Monahan, I think he's probably gone from the Winnipeg Jets. He's going to need a massive raise for $1.95 million this season, probably to $4.55 million. I think the Winnipeg Jets should be focused more on potentially signing a legit top 4 defenseman than, say, re-signing a Sean Monahan. He was fine for them. He was perfectly fine. Not really that good in the playoffs. I think he had 1 assist in 5 games. But regular season, he was actually a pretty good goal scorer. I think you move on from Sean Monahan and beef up your defense core with that money that you would maybe use to re-sign a Sean Monahan. Joe Pavelski for the Dallas Stars. I think Joe Pavelski has kind of lost his step. Even though he put up around like 70-point pace this year, I didn't really love his game this year, just far slower. The hands were not nearly the same. We've seen him blow breakaways in these playoffs. But still, I think he is going to re-sign because with Joe Pavelski, it's not like he made $7 million this season. He was only making $3.5 million. So if he wants to take a similarly cheap deal, if you're Dallas, why not do that? A 1-year deal at $3.5 million, even though I think he might take another step back next year and only be like a 45 to 50 point guy. Great locker room guy, does play both sides of the ice. I think the Dallas Stars should bring back a Joe Pavelski, especially considering he has not been greedy in terms of wanting term in high AAVs. He just wants to win a Stanley Cup. If you do win the Stanley Cup, if you don't win the Stanley Cup, bring back Joe Pavelski. Chandler Stephenson, this was the other guy that I was referencing with Brett Pesce that I think is basically gone for the most part. He's going to need a massive raise. He's going to need $5.56 million. And I think if Vegas is going to re-sign one of their guys, they're clearly going to re-sign Marchessault over Chandler Stephenson, especially considering they did acquire another center in Tomas Hertl. So when looking at Stephenson, I think he's going to be one of the most prized centers, second-line centers on the open market this summer, and I think someone is going to offer him a healthy, like, 5-year deal at $5.5 million. I think Chandler Stephenson is as good as gone. Next up, Jake DeBrusk, before the playoffs, I would have said good as gone. Nah, had a down year after scoring at like a 70-point pace last year when the Boston Bruins were absolutely cooking. He only had, I believe, 19 goals, 21 assists, 40 points this year, but he was very good in the playoffs. He was massive for them against the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially on the power play. I think they're going to find a way to re-sign Jake DeBrusk, and especially because Boston does have the money to re-sign guys. I'd rather re-sign a Jake DeBrusk, a known quantity in Boston, has the chemistry with the players. You can trust him and rely on him, compared to maybe going out and trying to find somebody at a comparable age, comparable position for $4.5 million. I think you're better off just re-signing Jake DeBrusk. Not a massive long-term deal, but yeah, like 4 years, 4.5, maybe 3 years. I think you re-sign Jake DeBrusk. Nikita Zadorov for the Vancouver Canucks. I think they're going to find a way to re-sign him. I think they're going to re-sign him. I think he was very good in Vancouver. Big physical guy when looking at it. I think they are going to re-sign him and Tyler Myers, both at Tyler Myers is going to get a decent drop off in his pay, but I think Zadorov is going to come back. I think he's built for the playoffs, and I think he had a solid showing overall. So as a result, they're going to re-sign him. Brady Skjei for the Carolina Hurricanes. This is a really tough one because Brady Skjei, rightfully so, is going to want a massive contract. Had 47 points in the regular season. In the playoffs, had like 9 points in 9 points in 11 games. No, it was like 8 points in 10 games. They only played 11 games. I'm trying to think. 5 games against the Islanders and 6 games against Rangers. But Brady Skjei was fantastic for the Carolina Hurricanes this year. He's going to need a decent raise in his pay, but I think them shipping out Martin Necas as well as letting Brett Pesce walk, and they'll probably choose re-signing Skjei over re-signing Teravainen, considering I think Nadeau and Jackson Blake are going to be able to play at the NHL level next year. I think they are very, very good players. I think they're going to find a way to re-sign Brady Skjei. I hope they don't, because I really like Brady Skjei's overall game, but I think they're going to find a way to re-sign him. It's going to be a decently expensive contract. It's probably going to be like 5 or 6 years at $5.75 million, but I think they're going to re-sign him, especially considering Brett Burns, although he's a very good player right now, he's going to start going down. So eventually Brady Skjei, unless Nicky Shin really hits the ground running once he comes over, he's going to have to be the number 2 defenseman on this team in probably 2 to 3 years. So I think you re-sign him. I don't think you let a Brady Skjei walk when it's all said and done this summer. Shayne Gostisbehere, I'm going to say re-sign. I think when looking at Shayne Gostisbehere, I think they're going to re-sign him for like a 2 to 3 year deal at around $4.5 million. When looking at Shayne Gostisbehere, he was very, very good offensively for the Detroit Red Wings this year. And I think Edvinsson and Axel Sandin Pellikka aren't really probably ready to play massive minutes right out of the gate in the next year or two. So when looking at it, they already got Ben Sherratt, Justin Holl. They need to re-sign a guy like Gostisbehere, who was pretty damn good this season for them, far exceeded expectations for them. I think bringing him back on kind of a shorter term basis would be a good move for the Detroit Red Wings. Maybe he hits the open market and gets a longer term deal, but I think Detroit would be wise to bring him back. Patrick Kane, I'm going to say leave. I think Patrick Kane is going to hit the open market. You saw him, although I don't think you should read too much into it, you saw him release a statement after the season saying, like, thanking the Detroit Red Wings fans. I think if anything, that leads to him thinking that, oh, maybe he's gone. I think he would release that after you resign or after you sign with a different team, or you wouldn't release that unless you're leaving. So in looking at it, Patrick Kane was fantastic, and I think he's probably going to find his way onto I'm not saying Detroit's not going to be a playoff team next year or a decent level team, but I think he's going to try to find his way onto a spot of an actual legit contending team. It's probably going to be a 1 year deal at a decent cap hit of around $4 to $5 million. But I think Patrick Kane, although he had a very, very successful time in Detroit, was almost a point per game player, I think he is going to go to a more competitive, highly competitive, maybe he can go on to win a Stanley Cup, considering he maybe only has 2 to 3 years left on his career. Not saying him in Detroit was a failure. It was a massive success at $2.75 million, but I don't think that he's going to end up re-signing in Detroit. Then Elias Lindholm, I'm going to go with leaving as well. I think that he's still going to want $7.58 million. And if you're the Vancouver Canucks and you already got Pettersson on a mega deal, Hughes is getting paid a decent amount and going to need a mega deal in like 2 to 3 years. Miller's making $8 million. Besser's going to need a contract next summer at around $8.59 million. I think they'd be smart to let Lindholm walk and instead re-sign their guys like Dakota Joshua, Teddy Bluger, Sam Lafferty, Zadorov, Myers. I think they'd be better to spread that money out instead of getting another high-end guy. Because although he was very good in the playoffs for them, and especially on the penalty kill, regular season was not that impressive. So I think going forward, letting Lindholm walk, a guy that could be your third line center, or I guess you could just throw him on the wing. I think it would be better off just spreading that money out decently and giving this team depth. Giving Elias Pettersson an actual winger to play with would be far better than re-signing Elias Lindholm. And then lastly, Matt Duchene, and I'm going to go with walk. He's going to need a massive raise. He's going to need a massive raise, $3 million this season. That's going to probably get doubled on the open market. And although Dallas can maybe offer him a 1-2 year deal, you look at their cap structure and why Johnson's going to need a contract, not this summer, but the following summer. I think they should give him just an 8-year deal, $9 million. Forget about it. See you later. Thomas Harley's going to need a massive raise off his ELC. That's probably going to be $6 million, $6.5 million, as well as Logan Stankoven is coming off his ELC in 2 years from now. So I think Dallas needs to be a little bit smarter with their money, although Ben is coming up in 2 years and Sagan's coming up in 3 or 4 years. I think that they should let him walk and just prioritize keeping the core and spreading the money out maybe more efficiently, although they do have fantastic depth. I don't love the idea of giving a 32, 33-year-old Matt Duchene a 4-year deal at 6.5, although he has been fantastic for this team. I don't want to risk potentially him. He's been a very bipolar player throughout his entire career, although he was fantastic this year, so I probably wouldn't re-sign him. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these guys? Who do you think is going to sign? Who do you think is going to hit the open market and leave? Obviously, guys, I'm trying to think like Adam Henrique, obviously hitting the open market. There's a couple rental guys. Tarasenko probably not re-signing in Florida. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And I'll be seeing the next one.